I followed him upstairs, heart thudding in my chest like it had something to confess. The party was still in full swing downstairs, voices echoing off the walls, laughter bubbling like champagne in overfilled glasses. But up here, everything felt still, thicker, like the air had secrets. He didn't say much, just looked back at me once with that sideways grin, the one that made my stomach flutter and my thoughts misbehave. He pushed open the door to one of the guest rooms, gesturing for me to go first. I stepped inside and stopped. She was already there, sitting on the edge of the bed like she belonged to the shadows, wine glass in hand, her legs crossed, eyes lifted to meet mine with something unreadable, calm, almost amused. Her lips curled just slightly as if she knew exactly what I was feeling. And maybe she did, because she was my friend. Not a close friend, maybe, but close enough that I remembered how she smelled after a hug. Close enough that I'd once drunkenly told her she was too beautiful to be real. I looked at him. He didn't look surprised. He looked prepared, like this had always been the plan. My back pressed against the closed door before I realized I'd even moved. I felt heat rush up my neck, not from embarrassment, but from the sudden undeniable awareness of where I was, who I was with, and what might be about to happen. She knows, he said simply, his voice low, like he was telling me a secret that had been waiting for the right moment. My friend stood up slowly, came toward me, not rushed, not shy. Her fingers brushed my wrist like an echo, like something remembered. "Do you want to leave?" she asked. I should have. I could have. But I didn't. And everything changed in that breathless pause between no and yes. The door clicked behind me like a soft promise or a trap. I wasn't sure which. My breath caught in my throat as she moved past me, her perfume brushing my skin like a memory I didn't know I'd kept. Vanilla, maybe. Or something warmer, darker. He leaned against the dresser, watching but not saying a word. That grin was gone now, replaced by something quieter. Hungrier. Like he was waiting to see what I'd do when no one was pretending anymore. She turned to face me, close enough now that I could see the smudge of her lipstick, the slow rise and fall of her chest. Her fingers grazed mine again, this time on purpose. A silent question. A dare wrapped in silk. "I didn't know you too." I began, but my voice faded, because I wasn't sure what I was even asking. What were they, the two of them? A game? A test? A door I hadn't realized I'd been walking toward all night? She smiled softly. "We didn't plan this." But I didn't believe her. Not really. Because the way they both looked at me, it was too aligned, too patient. Like I'd been the missing piece to something they hadn't quite named yet. "I've thought about you," she said then, so quietly I almost missed it. My pulse jumped. Her gaze didn't falter. I couldn't look away. "I've thought about what it would feel like," she continued, "to see what's under that confident laugh, what you'd sound like if you stopped holding back." I wanted to say something clever. I wanted to pretend I was in control. But my body betrayed me. Heat pooling low, breath catching. Skin suddenly too aware of every inch it covered. He still hadn't moved. She reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her fingers lingered, barely touching my jaw, and I felt it everywhere. Desire didn't hit like a wave. Curled in slowly. Subtle. Dangerous. And I knew, if I stayed a second longer, I wouldn't be able to leave at all. There was a moment. Not long, maybe just a few heartbeats, where everything held still. I could hear the muffled music from downstairs. I could hear my own breath, shallow and uneven. And beneath that, I could hear hers. Closer now. Warmer. We hadn't touched, not really. Not in the way my skin was begging for. But the space between us felt electric. Every inch we didn't close made me ache more. He still hadn't spoken, but I could feel his presence behind me like gravity. I didn't have to turn around to know he was watching, not with judgment but with a kind of reverence. Like he wanted to witness what I'd become when I let go. I looked at her. She was watching me, but not with expectation. More like invitation. "I don't know what I'm doing," I said. My voice was quieter than I meant it to be. "That's okay," she whispered. "Just feel it." She stepped in closer, slow, deliberate. Our bodies didn't touch, not yet. But the heat between us made my skin prickle. She tilted her head, eyes still locked on mine. And for a second I thought she might kiss me. But she didn't. Instead, her fingers traced the inside of my wrist, the lightest touch like wind catching a flame. I shivered. My breath hitched. And I realized I was leaning in without meaning to. My body answering questions my mind hadn't formed yet. Behind me I felt his breath closer now too. The room felt smaller. More intimate. As if the three of us had slipped into some parallel space where rules didn't apply. No one said anything. Because nothing needed to be said. Her hand moved slowly up my arm past my shoulder and into my hair. A soft tug that made my knees want to give. My hands found her waist before I knew I'd moved. The fabric of her dress was cool, but her body was anything but. He was close enough now that I could feel him at my back. Not touching but present. Like the air itself was thick with anticipation. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't even fast. It was slow, heavy, unspoken. And in the quiet we were already unraveling. I don't remember closing my eyes. Maybe it was her breath on my cheek, or the way his presence behind me felt like a second heartbeat. But somewhere between the silence and the touch, my thoughts just floated away. All that was left was sensation, breath, skin, and something that felt like surrender. Her hands cupped my face, not demanding, not urgent, just present, like she wanted to memorize me. Her forehead touched mine and for a second we just stood there, breathing the same air. Letting the closeness speak in ways words never could. Behind me, I felt the warmth of his hands, one resting at the curve of my waist, the other grazing down my arm, anchoring me between them. My body became the quiet space where two different energies met. Hers soft and curious, his firm and steady. Together, they felt like a storm I wanted to get lost in. I don't think I've ever wanted something I didn't understand this much, I whispered. The words surprised me as they left my mouth, like some part of me had been waiting to admit it. You don't need to understand it, she said, voice low. You just need to feel it. And I did. God, I did. I felt it in the way her hands roamed slowly, reverently, tracing the shape of who I was beneath the surface. I felt it in the way his breath stirred the fine hairs at the nape of my neck, in how his body mirrored mine, not rushing, just matching. When her lips finally touched my skin, it wasn't possessive. It was permission. A question I answered with the tilt of my head, the curve of my back pressing closer to him, the sound that caught in my throat and didn't quite become a moan. Time blurred. The air between us hummed with something more than lust. It was curiosity, permission, hunger, a fragile kind of trust built in the absence of hesitation. Their hands were poetry, different verses, same rhythm. And in the middle of it, I stopped trying to make sense of what I was doing. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't performing. I wasn't controlling. I was just there. Seen, touched, wanted. And the more I let go, the more I realized. I had never really been held like this before. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from stillness, but from being so deeply in the moment that everything else falls away. That's where we were. She pressed her palm against my chest, just above my heart, like she wanted to feel it move. And it did, wild, unruly, aching to be known. He hadn't said a word since we stepped into that room, but I could feel every emotion in the way he moved. How he stayed just close enough to let me lean back into him. How his hands waited for mine to guide them. How he didn't push or claim. He just offered. Her lips hovered near mine for what felt like forever. Every second of restraint made my skin burn hotter. When we finally kissed, it wasn't fireworks. It was something slower, deeper. Like we'd unlocked a door neither of us knew we'd been knocking on for years. Her mouth tasted like wine and adrenaline. Her breath trembled just slightly. Enough to let me know I wasn't the only one unraveling. I felt him behind me, one hand trailing up my spine, his mouth barely grazing the back of my shoulder. And I swear I could have cried from how much I felt in that one single touch. Like he knew exactly where to go without needing a map. Like I'd been carrying a need I couldn't name, and now it was finally speaking for itself. There was no jealousy, no confusion, just a delicate kind of choreography, two sets of hands learning my skin like a story they'd always wanted to read. When her fingers slipped under the fabric at my waist, I didn't stop her. I didn't flinch. I just let it happen. Let the sensation bloom and take over. Let my body speak in breath and pulse and tremble. He kissed my neck then, and I made a sound I didn't recognize. Not because I was surprised, but because I was free. And in that tangle of limbs and low gasps, of skin and wanting and whispers against warm skin, I stopped wondering what this meant. I just let it mean everything. I don't remember who pulled me down to the bed. Maybe it was all three of us at once. Like gravity had finally caught up with us and decided none of us should be standing anymore. The sheets were cool, but our bodies weren't. Every shift of fabric, every brush of skin, every shallow breath felt amplified. The room was dim, but I could still see her. Above me now, her hair falling around her face like a curtain, her lips parted, her eyes impossibly soft. And him beside me, behind me, I couldn't tell anymore. All I knew was the feel of him. Steady and warm and always where I needed him to be. There was no order to it. No structure. Just instinct. Urge. The slow blooming of surrender. Her fingers found places I hadn't realized were still aching. His breath stayed near my ear, whispering nothing and everything with every slow exhale. I was pinned not by weight but by awareness so deeply in my body that it almost hurt to feel this much. I arched into her touch like I'd been waiting my whole life for it. I turned into his hands like I belonged there. And somehow, in the chaos of tangled limbs and shivering breath, we moved together. Not just physically but emotionally. Like we weren't trying to claim each other. We were just trying to understand one another. At one point, she rested her forehead on my shoulder and laughed. Breathless, nervous, a little overwhelmed. I laughed too. Not because it was funny but because it was real. It reminded me that we were still people beneath all this fire. Still human. Still unsure. Still capable of being undone by something as simple as being wanted in the right way. When our bodies stilled, just for a moment, I lay there between them, eyes half closed, heart thundering. And I realized I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. But the wildest part? I didn't want to. Afterward, we didn't rush to move. We stayed tangled, still breathing in the warmth of what had just happened. It wasn't awkward, surprisingly it felt like the opposite. Like silence had become a kind of language between us. She lay beside me, fingers absent-mindedly tracing lazy circles on my stomach. He was behind me, arm draped around my waist, his breath calm now, syncing with mine like a rhythm we had unknowingly been building toward all night. It should have felt messy, complicated, but it didn't. It felt clear. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if any of us would say something. Break the spell. Define it. Ruin it. She beat me to it. "You okay?" she asked softly, brushing a strand of hair from my face. Her voice held no apology, no fear, just care. The kind of gentle attention that left me unexpectedly emotional. I nodded and to my own surprise whispered, "I don't think I've ever felt this seen." He kissed the back of my shoulder in answer, slow, reverent. Something inside me cracked open. I didn't know if this was love, or lust, or something in between. But I knew that whatever it was, it had touched something buried deep. Something I hadn't realized I was starving for. Connection. Not the performative kind. Not the kind that came with expectations or promises. But the kind that just was. She shifted, her leg brushing mine. "We didn't plan this," she said again. "But I think maybe we needed it." He hummed low like he agreed. Like he had nothing to add except the warmth of his body against mine. And I, still floating in that strange breathless calm, realized something else. We hadn't just crossed boundaries tonight. We'd rewritten them. And none of us had looked away. We eventually dressed in silence. Not because we didn't know what to say, but because sometimes silence says more. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but full. Charged with something unspoken and understood. She smiled at me as she buttoned her blouse, the corner of her mouth tugging upward like we shared a secret now, one no one else would ever quite understand. I returned it, soft and slow, still wrapped in a haze of warmth and disbelief. He pulled his shirt over his head, then stepped toward me, brushed his thumb along my cheek like he was memorizing me. He didn't say anything, just pressed a kiss to my temple, light as a breath. No one tried to define it. No promises. No labels. Just something that had happened. Something that had changed us. As we opened the door and stepped back into the noise of the party, the music swallowed us again. Voices, laughter, the clink of glasses. It was as if the rest of the world had never paused. No one noticed. No one knew. Except us. She slipped her hand into mine for a brief second. Not long enough to be obvious. Just long enough to say, yes, that was real. And then she let go. We went our separate ways across the room, drifting back into casual conversations and sideways glances. But I carried something with me the rest of the night. Something I couldn't name. Something that pulsed quietly beneath my skin. Later, lying in my own bed alone, I touched the spot on my wrist where she had first brushed her fingers. It still tingled. And I realized I would never look at either of them the same again. Sometimes the most unforgettable things are the ones we never meant to do.